So I decided to watch Enterprise. I watched it because my friend slash my sister's boyfriend James, he talked about it a lot, and I was curious. And previously, I hadn't watched it before. I believe while it aired, I might have watched the first 2, 3 episodes, but then after that, I'm like, this is really boring. And then I just didn't watch anymore. And yeah, all of the first season is actually pretty damn boring. Like, there were times when I found myself nearly falling asleep because storylines where the characters go down to a planet and then like freak out on the hallucinogenic pollen is not a strong enough premise to base an entire episode around. Like, if they really wanted that in an episode, it should have been the B plot, because that's so boring. Okay, and really, I think the biggest reason is that Rick Berman, Brendan Braga, they were sick of Star Trek at that point. And Rick Berman, a little while in an article 2, 3 years ago, was like, oh, well, fans, sci-fi fans were getting franchise fatigue, and even Trek fans were getting sick of Trek. And it's like, no, dude. You were the one who got sick of Trek, which... to give Berman, a little credit, not to be too hard on him, I can understand that, because this guy at that point had been doing Trek for 13 years since, The Next Generation aired, and had his hand in 3 Trek series, must have just like lived and breathed nothing but Trek for 13 years. And when Voyager ended, I imagine in my mind, he was like, oh Christ, I gotta make another one of these fucking shows. Well, if I'm contractually obligated to do it, I guess I gotta do it. And, yeah, really, it wasn't until season 4 when they got Manny Coto to be another producer that I even felt like I was watching Trek. And it's obviously that Coto wanted to make a show, and wanted to make a show that was about the premise, which was the birth of the Federation. Because it's right when he was on the show, we got an alien being that was testing humanity, and Gene Roddenberry had a big old boner for that trope. He had godlike alien beings testing humanity, doing tests for the humanity quite often in the original series, and even in Next Gen. And that's what Q is. Q is a omniscient judge of humanity, and usually when he comes into Next Gen, that's what he's doing there. He's testing humanity in general through the Enterprise crew. Right, and we also had a retelling of a story of classic literature in Enterprise, which, with the Icarus myth, and that's why that one episode is called Daedalus, that elderly, wheelchair-bound guy who invented the transporter. His son was killed, or in between death and life, because of a transporter accident, because of, hubris, and that's a retelling of the Icarus myth. And of course there were expanding on Trek mythology and connecting to other Trek shows, with the augments, and giving an explanation as to why Klingons have no ridges in the original series, stuff like that. And that's obviously what we want as Trekkies. One of the things we want to feel like we are part of, or getting a glimpse into, like, this bigger reality, and feeling like Star Trek is a thing that's so big that it exists beyond us, and that it's a universe that we can play in and expand on and theorize about and debate about. And so yeah. And although I think that they really could have gone further if Manny Coto was there from season 1, or if Rick Berman, Berman and Braga, if they cared to make more connections to the other shows, like they did with Arik Sung, if that's how you say, and that's the guy who, you know, he raised augments, he created augments. He was the ancestor of the guy who created Data then in for Next Generation. And really, I liked the augments. I thought that a lot of their characters had interesting personalities. They could have been villains of an entire season, I think. And but really, they could have brought more ancestors in. Oh, and I really like Brent Spinner's performance in those 3 episodes. I really liked that. Um, right, the ancestors didn't even need to be on senior staff. Like Trip could have been in engineering and been like, Ensign Paris, get over here, and we're like, oh my God, this guy is an ancestor of Tom, and Owen, I believe, was his dad's name, and that's like so cool. It would have been easy, and I don't know if anybody else got this feeling from Voyager, but I think that the Paris family kind of has this old money, or, you know, rather like old Federation vibe to them, where they have been involved in Starfleet and the Federation since pretty much forever. They've been doing that for a very long time. So I would have believed that an ancestor was on that original ship, or maybe the next ship that lady pilot, if she had someone on senior staff who was Ensign Paris or whatever. Um, yeah, the lady captain who was Archer's kind of girlfriend in the past. Like if she would have had somebody who was Ensign Paris, or they could have had I don't know, a woman whose last name was Jones or Smith or something, and then at the end of the show she meets some guy whose last name is Howard, which is Beverly Crusher's maiden name, or Crusher, or, you know, any Taurus, whatever. You know, it could have been so easy to do that. Or, and especially like Sokan, who was Spock's grandpa, he was alive during this time, you know, certainly. Like, why wasn't he in the show? It would have been really easy to put him in there and to give him a character, and and to be a reoccurring character. And supposedly, Solkar was Spock's great grandpa, who was the guy who shook Zefram Cochrane's hand in the first place. And I think that comes from like a proto canon, like an EU kind of thing, like an expanded universe kind of thing, where it's not necessarily canon, but they could have made that canon, and they could have put that in there, and it wouldn't have been hard. But right, despite you know, it's not really the lack of connections to other Trek shows that made me not like this Enterprise so much. It was really the fact that just about none of the characters feel like real people to me. I do not feel like a connection to them. I don't know who these people are. And I know some people have called Hoshi and Merryweather tokens, and it's like, yeah, I agree. I'm okay with lobbying that criticism at this show, because they were basically just talking heads. And I know there was some attempt to give Hoshi more of a character in season 4, but still, I know there was that episode, I think in season 2, where there was like that telepathic alien guy, and he's talking to her saying, oh, your grandpa was the last person you felt connected to, and you don't really feel connected to people. And I just thought to myself, well, where's the evidence of this? Like, storytellers, you're supposed to show instead of tell. You've never shown us that Hoshi has trouble connecting to the people, and we don't know anything about her home life, what her family was like, what it was like for her to grow up in Japan. We've never seen any of this before to give us an idea of who she is as a person, so you show just throwing this information at me. I don't believe it. I didn't believe any of these people. And Reed, there was supposedly talk of making him gay, and if he would have been gay, he would have been a token too. That was, I know Braga, like a big, one of his bigger regrets producing Trek was that he never had a gay character, you know, on the senior staff, or even really gay reoccurring character, or LGBT reoccurring character. Not to say that, you know, Enterprise did sort of do an episode that was about LGBT issues, I suppose, with that third gendered person, and that was one of the episodes that I liked a little more, where Trip tried to show a person whose name became Charles that Charles could be an individual, but Charles wasn't living in an environment conducive to their individuality, and they very tragically killed themselves, which obviously has happened to many LGBT people throughout history, where they just can't take the pressure of not being fully themselves and having to hide and having to, you know, be put into a box that they don't fit in, and that's horrible and tragic. So yeah. And then Merryweather, did he get any episodes like dedicated to him in the last 2 seasons? Like I think he might have had 2, maybe 3, the entire show that were focused on his character. So yeah, he, Toshi, tokens. And one thing that's kind of weird about this show is that usually Trek shows do actor blend or character blend, and they like method actors, and they like actors who like give big performances and have big personalities. And a lot of the time, if an actor has a special talent, training, or even like interest, they'll find a way to give it to the character. Like Jeri Ryan is a mimic, so they had her mimic the Doctor's character in Body and Soul. Or the Doctor, Robert Picardo, is an opera-trained singer, so they had him sing a lot in the show. But they didn't do that for any of the actors in Enterprise, so that's weird, and like another thing that made the show not really feel like a Trek show to me. So yeah, I have issues with T'Pol. For one, I mean, I'm sure the actress who plays her is a lovely person, but she does not have the presence or subtlety to play a Vulcan. I don't think every actor has that. Like, every actor, not every actor can be funny, not every actor can sing, you know, not every actor can do everything, and she I just don't think was right for the role at all. And it's kind of depressing, because it would have been really cool to get a female character, a female Vulcan on the show, to finally sort of get the Vulcan culture from a woman's perspective. But yeah, I don't think we got that with T'Pol, especially because how they often seem to treat her Vulcanness as a problem that the narrative had to overcome some way. And I don't want to think the producers sexist, but the fact that she being the only Vulcan character that we've seen who is obsessed with emotions, you know, because women are so emotional, am I right? Like, they just can't control themselves, because women are just like crazy and irrational people in general. That's like just in their nature. And maybe that's not what they intended at all. Maybe that wasn't even in the back of their minds at all. But it felt gross, honestly, to me, and sexist, and I hated that. But yeah, I mean, I get the sense that they were trying to make her basically Seven of Nine 2.0, but in the case of Seven, like Seven defrosting towards humans and forming relationships and becoming more empathetic, and even getting in a romantic relationship, which I know a lot of people hated, me included. I think it's dumb and forced and contrived, but her getting into, like, the fact of her getting into a romantic relationship itself, like, wouldn't have been so dumb or so crazy. Her doing all of this was her reclaiming her humanity, reclaiming an identity that had been stolen from her as a child. Like, she was taken by the Borg as a little girl. So her, going through this process of becoming more human was her reclaiming an identity. But like T'Pol isn't a human. She's a Vulcan. She's not a human with pointy ears, which is how I felt like the narrative kind of treated her. And supposedly in the 5th season, it was going to be revealed that she had been half Romulan this whole time, which, if that was their intent all along, that's kind of cool. But I get the sense that somebody came up with that idea to sort of cover the bad writing and the actress's sort of subpar performance. But yeah, and really the Vulcans in general seem like sort of assholes, who are less concerned with logic and reason as they are with bigotry and holding humankind back, which made me really feel like almost the Vulcans being misrepresented. Like, in the show, to me, I felt like Klingons were like Klingons, and Ferengi were like Ferengi, and Andorians were like Andorians, but the Vulcans didn't feel very Vulcan-y to me. And if it was really because, guys, they were really Romulans the whole time. Shh. Like, I guess I can buy that, but still. I don't know if anybody agrees with me on that. Her relationship with Trip didn't really make sense to me either. I would have actually, it would have made more sense to me if she would have gotten with Archer, because at first they didn't trust or respect one another, and then in season 2 you could see them earning each other's trust and respect and even friendship. And if that would have turned into a romantic relationship, that would have made sense to me. But with Trip, I guess Vulcan neuropressure, like, that was enough. It's like, okay, we're massaging each other, so I guess that means we want to bang each other now. I didn't know what he saw in her or what she saw in him, why their relationship made sense. I didn't get it. And Slash fans say so often that with a heterosexual couple, all the couple really needs to do is be in the same room together. And if you see them there together, you're like, yep, they'll get together at some point. I feel like it's like that with Trip and T'Pol. I liked Archer. I really didn't care much for either way. He felt like another talking head to me, not really a person who had a lot of personality at all. I liked his dog. I liked Porthos. I liked his dog much more than I liked him. Phlox was my favorite character in the main cast, and I liked how we got a picture of who he was as a Denobulan, who he was as a doctor, like how his cultural perspectives meshed with the human perspectives, and he paired well with all of the other main characters. Like, him and T'Pol had a rapport, and I actually tended to like her a little when they were in scenes together. And he was good with Archer and Trip, and he even had scenes with Hoshi that were endearing. So I liked Phlox, and his actor was clearly very well suited for the role, who brought like a lot of energy. And we found out about his home life, that episode where that alien from that race, that they and Denobulans have had tension like 300 years ago, and how that's still affecting their society today, and how Phlox tried not to make his kids like that, but one of his kids is racist towards that other group of aliens, and that's one of the reasons why for their estrangement. So yeah, like that's how you should do that. You make the social commentary personal, and then it sticks with you more. Like, most of the episodes of Enterprise, I watched this show like maybe a week ago, and I barely remember most of the episodes. I remember that episode. I remember most of the episodes where Phlox was like the lead. I also like Trip. I also feel like he was a bit lacking in personality. And season 3, it's like, oh, I lost my sister. That's so sad and tragic. And obviously, that disaster was supposed to be a metaphor for 9/11. But it's like, you know, Trip, maybe I would have felt sadder for you if I even knew you had a fucking sister, you know, but again, they didn't build any of these characters up, and James said, he's like, maybe Trip's sister and Jessica from Supernatural are friends because you know, like, same deal in Supernatural. Like, Jessica dies. Like, she just dies. Like, that's the only contribution she has to the plot. And she has zero personality. We know nothing about Jessica. Like, we don't know who her family was. We don't know what her major was. We don't know who her friends are. And kind of same deal with Elizabeth. I mean, we know who her family was, but we never hear about Trip's parents. We never meet them. He never talks about them. We don't get insight into their personalities. So it feels empty. And, you know, how am I just supposed to be sad that, you know, Trip's sister died, like, only for Trip's sake, and not because, like, I knew this character and therefore I'm also sad on her behalf that she's dead and she's not a part of the show anymore. That would have made it more meaningful if we knew who Elizabeth was. But we never learn who she was. She's just she's a prop for the show, and that's it. You know, yeah, I'm not sad when they have to rebuild part of the ship, because that's a prop too. So, not sad. Wasn't sad about her dying. I thought I liked the idea of the Xindi in third season. You know, I like the fact that 5 or 6 species had evolved on this one planet. And I liked that, you know, the guy who created the weapon in the first place, and how he then comes to learn of his mistake and learn that humans aren't the monsters that he had been told, and his journey and what he went through. Way more interesting than any of the main characters, what they went through in third season. I can't remember that guy's name. It started with a D. Yeah, he was one of the Xindi primates. Y'all know what I'm talking about who have seen the show. Yeah, Sharan, like, I'm firmly on that bandwagon to say, like, Sharan is the best thing about Enterprise, was the best thing about Enterprise. He should have been in the main cast. Show would have been much better if it focused on Alpha Quadrant, you know, skirmishes and the politics of the various alien races and how humanity then got involved in those, because really that's what the show was set up to be about, not the fucking temporal Cold War. I'm also on that bandwagon of everybody who's saying, like, that was stupid. The temporal Cold War, like, why make that your central conflict when your show is supposed to be about the founding of the Federation? Like, who cared about that? Who thought that was a good idea of the fans? I don't know. You know, it was stupid. Yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say. Oh, and I hated Daniel's mesh black uniform thing. That was so ugly. And why he was even there, and Temporal Cold War was dumb. Oh, maybe in season 2. I liked season 2 a little bit more because John Shiban was a producer that season, and he also wrote some of the episodes, like Minefield. I liked the episode Minefield. I appreciate the attempt to give Malcolm Reed more of a character. You know, I appreciate attempts like that in the parts of the writers who maybe actually gave a damn about the show. Okay. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen.